Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Today is our special guest day, where we will hear from a friend of the ministry who will share their insight and stories on truth in this chaotic world. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is guest day, and we're very excited about having our special guests, Dean and Trish Harrington from Rhode Island, right? You guys are from Rhode Island. What town exactly are you guys live in?
The People's Republic of Rumford. About 4 miles outside of Providence.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yep.
And are you running the town yet, Dean, or?
Only in my own mind, Rich. Only in my own mind.
Trish may be running it, though.
Trish actually does kind of have a pretty good role. Right, Trish?
That's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah. She's kind of let's just call her the city commentator.
Okay. All right. Good.
We'll call it that nicely.
Okay. We'll have a podcast about that interesting thing. That'll be fun to pursue.
Yeah.
So Trish and Dean are involved with C12. They have a fantastic business, which Dean will describe in a few minutes. And we got to know them through coming to an abiding retreat, and then them learning what it means to abide and then give it away, actually, in a beautiful way. So to start with, why don't you share with our audience how did you each come to know Christ originally? So Trish, why don't we start with you? How did you come to know Christ?
So I've been alone for quite some time, both as a child and had some things happen as a child that, in today's world, it seems a little bit more normal, with dysfunctions in families and whatnot. However, when I was growing up, it was not as dysfunctional, but so things happened. And I always felt there was someone with me. Like I used to see that poster with the beach, yeah. And there was 2 sets of footprints.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And even though I wasn't with Christ at the time, I always had this warmth inside me when, things did happen. I felt that there was always someone with me, and I did feel faithful, but the walk wasn't what it should be. It certainly, it took some time. So as an adult, these things happened more frequently, and I was always taken care of. I always felt like when things did happen, I was held tight in the hands of my Father. And at that time, I didn't realize that who it was or what was happening, but I felt it. It was an inner warmthness to me. So I'm a fairly new Christian. I'm about 6 or 7 years now. And when my husband and I came to this, realization that, okay, we're going to, really get into this and really be obedient, I realized that my entire life he was there. And now was the time, okay, now he's been there for you. You need to stop paying attention. You need to build a relationship. So basically, my testimony came when we committed as a family that we were going to make this happen in both our lives, and commit and be obedient and ensure that Jesus was the focus of our lives, our family, and that's basically it. I mean, there's a number of little tiny things that made this happen, but it was an all-encompassing thing where we decided as a family, okay, we're going to do this. Yeah. We're going to be obedient.
That's great. That's great.
And thank God we did.
Yeah, amen. Amen to that. Dean, how about you?
Yeah, I grew up really strongly Catholic. My dad was actually very involved in the hierarchy of the Catholic Church here in Southern New England, but he was an interesting guy. That he was also the Cub Scout leader for the city. So he told the kids when we were young that they were in his troop that if you have a different church other than the one we're meeting in right now, I'll go to church with you. So somewhere along the line, he co-signed me to that agreement at 10 years old. And so I got exposed to, I got exposed to Methodist, Baptist, Zion Bible, and different things in a very kind of ordinary way. But I always felt the love of God, and I always felt closeness to God. I always had a strong faith. But it really was a couple of junctures in my 30s where 30s were a real difficult time for me personally until Trish came into my life, and I truly mean that. And God kind of leaned into me that you need to have a relationship with my son. Jesus is the way, the truth, and life. And I didn't know what that meant because it wasn't really part of my church experience. And so God used a couple of different crazy paths, including my oldest daughter dating a boy whose father was a Baptist preacher, and him showing up at my house one day and intent on telling me basically that I was going to hell. And then later found out he was in my office a week later saying, hey, you're a saved Christian. You have a relationship with Christ. And he handed me a book, a little pamphlet book called Done by Carrie Schmidt. And I've now probably ordered, this is actually a neat little kind of math question. I've ordered 300 of those books across the last 15 years, and I've given out only about 50 of them, but I don't have any left. So that'd be an algebra question for you, Rich. Because whenever I hand one out, I get people to come back and ask for 5 or 6 more.
Right.
Which is kind of really the power of it. And then through another series of different events that would be take too long to get into, that are just God connections of people, ended up kind of leaving the Catholic Church, getting involved with a Bible-based church, which really taught me that the Word of God is living and breathing, and will help discern your will, not to quote book titles as I go through here today, Rich, but I will. And then I think for us as a couple, the linkage was really in October 15 when we did our first abiding retreat with you. And I think both Trish and I came powerfully moved.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
By that experience. So, and then our family has followed in that obedience and truly that surrender to Christ and a life in Christ. Our children are walking with Christ, and I think you and I had a discussion once, Rich, when I asked you, does this mean the curses are over? I mean, I said, source the blessings. Who in my past has sourced the blessings? And he said, I don't know who to source the blessings with, but the curses have ended.
Yeah.
And that's just such a great tribute to your wisdom and leadership of really sticking to the word.
Yeah,
so
it's beautiful.
That's my story in a nutshell.
Yeah, beautiful. And your dad, you said your dad would go to these prospective Boy Scouts and go with them to their churches and stuff?
Yeah.
That's cool.
And Zion Bible was kind of neat because it was an auditorium, and it was like 300 people in an auditorium that was diagonal to our house. We were the only white people there, and it was very charismatic, and they would sit up, and they were very almost Pentecostal in their enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And I'm like, are we supposed to be here? Are we okay? My dad was just so comfortable in that setting.
Yeah.
And that just
beautiful.
stuck with me. And my dad died fairly young. He died at 59. He died suddenly. I was just telling the story this morning. On the morning of my father's death, his car hit an underpass here in town. And so I had to get towed. And I went over to the house to see if he'd be okay. What happened? And he said, he didn't answer that my car had the underpass. He didn't answer that I got in a car accident. He answered with, the Lord had mercy on me.
Wow.
And he went in the other room, turned on TV, sat in a rocking chair. I left to go play basketball, and he died in that chair.
My goodness.
Wow.
So he had died on that underpass, but the shock of the accident gave him kind of a defibrillation.
Yeah.
His reaction was, the Lord had mercy on me.
Wow. That's comforting.
Wow.
That's comforting.
Didn't let me die in an underpass.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. I've heard this story before, and quite frequently, and now I'm thinking, did he actually mean the Lord had mercy on him at that very time, or through his life?
Probably at that moment, but reflectively, I think, he'd lost my mom when we were in high school just a few years before that, after a very quick 2-week illness and death. So he was reeling from a lot of stuff, but yeah, he may have meant that more than just that. My brothers and I talk about that a lot, that my brothers walk strongly with Christ, which is such a blessing to me.
Yeah.
And so it'd be a discussion with, what do you think about Dad? And it'd be like, well, you tell me the last words he said to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
The last words he said to me would, the Lord had mercy on me.
Yeah.
What a blessing that is for you as well,
what a
just
great
to be able to
testimony.
hold on to those.
Such a comfort. Such
Yeah.
a comfort.
Now, how did you two meet and then decide to get married? How did that go?
I held a big raffle because I was single, and thousands of and Trish lost.
So it was the person that lost the raffle had to follow
Yeah.
through with Dean. Huh?
That's the way we do things up here.
Yeah,
We
okay.
know
In the
that
Northeast.
we say who he or she who is least of my brothers, right? So you can tell that story. Go ahead.
So I was studying for the CPA exam, and I was working for an appraiser, real estate appraiser. And so he was actually a good friend of mine, and he came to me one night and said, "Hey, we're going to a party, a Christmas party. Would you like to come?" And I'll never remember this. I'll never forget this, because had I not changed my mind, my life would be completely different today. So I remember looking up to him and saying, like, "Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? With everything I have to do, I can't go to a party." And he goes, "No, really, you have to go because it's important. You need a break." So I had him promise me it would be only a couple hours. And I went, and it just happened to be his company's party, Christmas party. He had maybe 10 or 15 people at the time working for him. So he invited the vendors, and we were a vendor, being an appraiser. And he was talking to my friends, whose name is Mike, about the Providence College basketball team, because I would go to the games. I went to Providence College, and I would go to the basketball games with my friend Mike. And he just happened to have season tickets as well. We were in the non-alcoholic section. But
are you saying Dean was in another section?
Dean was in another section, correct.
Rich, I had courtside seats. She didn't.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
But you have to drink alcohol. No, I'm only kidding.
Yeah.
So I said to him, there was one big game coming up, and it was Providence College and the University of Rhode Island. And that's like a Rhode Island,
Rivalry.
It's a big thing. Yeah. So it was coming up in 2 days. And I said, "So who are you going to the game with?" And he said,
You.
he looked at me and he said, "You." And I was like, "Whoa, I like that. I like that decisiveness."
How's it feel now?
Yeah, no, I don't like it anymore.
Oh,
I should have known.
yeah.
No. So that's it.
Yeah.
And then we just went we had lunch the next day. Then we went to the game, which was kind of cool. And then we just started off right then and
Yeah.
there, right?
Trish started dating me the following week, and I started dating her about 2 years later. And
Yeah.
before you know it, we were married.
So Dean, when she asked that question, you just responded with, I want to take you.
I just said, I'm going with you.
Yeah.
Because she
There's
was good
some
looking.
confidence in that statement right
she was,
there.
she was really good looking, and she was there.
Was?
Yeah, she is, obviously.
You are. We'll verify that.
Yeah, so that's how it got rolling.
Yeah.
I drive by that office, and this is, you could probably imagine this. I drive by that office, it's still there. And I think how much God changed my life that night. Truly.
Yeah.
It scares me to look at that building.
Yeah.
It scares me to realize that what if she didn't come? And God might have had a different plan for me to meet her somewhere else. I'm very faithful in that order, but boy, I look at that building and I'm saying, whew. I tell the kids when we drive by, I said, that building right there, that building, which was our second Shamrock office.
Yeah. And then what was dating like? You said you dated for 2 years before you got married?
No, we dated for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well,
It was hard. I worked for a company where I went overseas quite frequently. And it was difficult, to date. It didn't go as it wasn't as fast dating like they are today.
Yeah.
I was married with a 6 and a 4-year-old, and she left abruptly and suddenly, and just took off and said, I don't want to be married. I don't want anything to do with the kids. And it was really God moving behind that scene, because there had been a lot of issues about infidelity with her. God was releasing me from that, giving me another opportunity. And then Trish came into my life, but the kids, I wasn't sure they were ready for another person in their lives. And so I kept space in there, and I did not check with God on any of that, because I think that God would have, I can't say I think what God would have, that's a terrible thing to say, but,
Terrible.
but I kept that period of dating open for the heart of my kids, I thought, but maybe it was a trust issue with me, or maybe it was something else. And it was not to my benefit, because once we got married, we were able to really take advantage of God's covenant agreements within a marriage and the generational blessings. And for her and I, Trish and I, to have 2 more children. And, I think back on that time and I'm like, I kicked around 5 years that didn't need to be kicked around. But
Baby making years, just saying.
yeah. Well, Kathy, you might appreciate this. You know what the downside of that is? So I turned 60 this year. When I turned 60 with a high school freshman. So like this, there's no retirement in the Bible, and I'm not going to retire, but this idea that we have a second home in Florida, that I'm ever going to get there for any stretch of time. I can go back from 1995 to 2000 when I just dragged my feet and said, I didn't think about the end of the road. Anyway. You don't need that. You don't need that story.
And what year did you get married?
2000.
2000.
Yeah.
Interesting. We've had April and Ned from the East, and they got married in 1999. So.
Right. And I think you guys, did you say your first Abide retreat that you went to was October of 2015 also?
Yeah,
It's
with
the
April
same.
and Ned.
That was the one with April and Ned.
April and Ned,
That's great.
Did April and Ned tell you they got married in 99 because they thought the world was going to end on 2000 and they didn't want to end single people?
That's
Did they decide that?
That's what they said, that they bought electric cars and.
Yeah. I don't know if that story's true, but it sounds good.
Yeah. So, and it sounded like, Dean, you already had your company Shamrock, right? When you were when you guys met. Tell us about that company. What is that like? What do you do, and how's that going for you right now?
So Shamrock's a mortgage lending company, consumer lending. We're in our 33rd year, turned 32 years old in July. Started the company in 89, bought out a partner in 96, brought Trish into the company in 2001 because she was an international auditor traveling all around. We weren't going to be able to have a family with that. And she was incredibly overqualified. We were a mortgage broker at that time, and we were going to make the jump to mortgage lender, which in our industry is a big step.
Right.
So Trish said, look, I'll come in and walk with you on this. And we wouldn't have had the ability to attract somebody with her talent and her skills that early in that. So there was another providential moment with God saying, look, I'm going to put you in here. I think she probably would like to kind of regret that nowadays, but no, I'm just kidding. So we began to grow. Obviously the housing crisis came in to play. We really contracted during that period, held on tight. So many God stories in that. I was sharing some at dinner last night with a couple that just incredible God stories of where he showed up during that period, surviving us when 2/3 of the mortgage companies in the country went out of business in 07.
Right.
Wow.
And we survived, we turned it around. And
were you
now,
in C12 at that point?
No, I joined C12 in 2014, and that was a change agent for Shamrock, a complete change agent. And I can pivot to that a little bit. So Trish had approached me in the end, somewhere in the summer of 13, and said, look, you're miserable. You're miserable at your job. I can see it. You're not happy. You're not fulfilled. And 12 was a very profitable year, but the CFPB had come into play. That's a legislative body. That's the body that governs our industry. And the industry was tough. It was grinding. Rich, with your financial background, you might remember what 12, 13, 14 started to look like, just as threats to businesses because of very aggressive government regulation. And I was just really sitting there and I was just like, it's slugging around. I had been, 53 at that time, 54, had done well. And I thought, and Trish came out and said, why don't you take your ball and go home? Just take your ball and go home. And I got so offended by that. And I don't really have an offended gene in me, but I was like, no, I'm not done. And through a set of circumstances you just can't put together, I end up in front of Rick Ferris, chairman of C12. And I joined C12 and I quickly realized that I had the org chart backwards. I always knew that God was real. I had to walk with Christ, but I thought it was my company and God was there for me. In the good times, I would praise him, and in the bad times, I'd pray to him. But it quickly teaches you at C12 that it's his company. You serve at his discretion and his will. Do you know what kind of pressure that takes off somebody?
Yeah.
Like enormous pressure removed instantly when you surrender it to him. So we started moving along, went through, 15, 16, we're normal year, 17, 18, obviously 20 came along. Very challenging year for a period of time, and then a very robust year. We began a national growth campaign. We were in 6 states, so kind of a sub-regional company with about 80 employees, and we decided in the early 2020 to begin to grow. So now we're in 23 states with 160 employees.
Wow.
And asking ourselves every day, are we nuts? And I keep checking with God on it and confirming, and Trish does that at times as well. And it's fun and it's scary all at the same time.
Yeah, sure.
So I don't know where he's going to lead us, but we're both faithful to staying. He's made it clear to me, mainly through my abiding, Rich, that it's as long as you make it people over profit, I'm behind it.
That's right.
So I always thought, maybe you could, why don't you speak into it? Because I talked long enough, just the growth and just the whole thing.
Yeah, so when we talk about our growth, we talk mostly about how many people we can affect. And, truth be told, we try to bring in and have had a good foundation in bringing in people who do have some type of walk. That doesn't disqualify someone as for coming in, but it's led to a nice foundation here. People who have a walk enjoy being around people who have a walk, and it makes us stronger for when we bring people in who don't have a walk. I think we've changed some lives that we normally would not have been able to change had we not had those, people who walk with the Lord in the building. We continue to be attractive to those people. With the ministries that we have a corporate chaplain, we have a prayer group in the morning. We're starting a women's Bible study in 2 weeks. We have different financial things in place that will help individuals who are in need. We obviously have the requisite company charities that we donate to, but we are constantly attracting very, not only highly qualified and highly technical people, but also people who can change lives inside and outside the building.
Yeah.
And that really has been, we talk a lot here about our culture. And people say, oh, is it a fun place to work? Do you go out for drinks and after a good month? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a culture where the individual can thrive in their lives based on many factors. And the biggest factor we like to see is the factor of them developing spiritually.
Right.
It's important to all our, I would think, well, maybe not to all our managers, but definitely the executive level and a good 3/4 of the managers in this building and even outside this building, that developing our people spiritually is extremely important.
Yeah. And Trish, do you still work for the company?
I work for the company, yes. I don't get paid enough. So if you can put in a good word for me, Rich, I would appreciate that.
All right. I'll have a conversation with Dean and make sure you get the big bonuses. And,
I appreciate that. Yeah.
I'll bring that to my C12 group next week and we'll see what they have to say.
Yeah.
I tell you, I love, Trish, what you described just a minute ago, because I think what you're really fleshing out there ties to what Dean said as when, and I'm assuming maybe this started more intentionally with when you stepped into C12, but if not, maybe he laid the groundwork before. But you guys really have embraced the idea that business is ministry.
Absolutely.
Period. And I know there's so much thinking out there right now that really the next big revival is starting with business influencers and business leaders. And the fact that you have just totally surrendered your company and said, this is your company, God, what do you want to do? And then you didn't just leave it there. You've stepped into, Trish just described all these steps that are beautiful ways that you're equipping your people and you're actually making an impact. And you know, I just love that sense of surrender and continual surrender. And what about now? What do you want us to do now? And you said you're starting up a women's study. So as he lays out more, you're continuing to just step in with faithfulness. And I love that.
And as you two, I know you came to that retreat, same one that Ned and April came to. Tell us about your abiding. What have you learned about that? How do you do it personally? And then what has that meant to you?
Want me to go first, or you?
I can, then you can finish when it's
Go ahead.
yeah.
Fire away.
So I love abiding. I cannot tell you enough how much it's changed. And there have been pockets in the past 4 years where I, for a few weeks or maybe no longer than a month and a half, where things had just gotten out of control and I put it aside. But once I pick it back up and am faithful, I realize how important it is. And the abiding answers my questions that I didn't even know I had.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I have had some since the first abiding, I've had some different issues that I've come up with, that have come up, and abiding has always answered them. If for some reason there wasn't an answer right away, it gave me the strength to proceed in a direction that God just pulled me because of the abiding. You know, I can think of an issue where I had to let someone go and they were a valuable person to me. And I was like, but what am I going to do? No one does what they do and I can't find anyone else. What am I going to do? And he didn't tell me what to do. He gave me the abundance of faith to push the fear aside.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
And once I pushed that fear aside, it was so clear to me what I had to do. And I felt he was sitting right there. I actually had to do it driving. I had to fire that person driving. And I remember driving and I felt he was right beside me sitting in that seat. So it's helped me tremendously with the decisions I've had to go for. I know we talked about I had cancer as well during this, and through the treatment, I remember getting pushed into the radiology where the radiation was, and I remember getting pushed into that tube every day, and I never felt alone. Never felt alone because I was in abiding. And I remember thinking about David and reading on David and just thinking, well, this is my fire. This is it. I got this.
Yeah.
So,
What's the status of that now, by the way?
I'm good so far. 3 years out.
Nice.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Your
Got a
turn.
great test.
Beat that.
I can't beat that.
You will.
No, I really won't. It's abiding. Here's the biggest takeaway, Rich, that I had with abiding from when I learned it in October of 15 right to now. That the abiding process in the morning and journaling a question and really asking two questions I didn't learn until later on in another study with you was, what are you doing here, God, and what do you have to say about this?
Yeah.
What are you doing and what do you have to say? Those are key components of my daily life. What do you have to say about this? And what are you doing here? And once I can journal that and I can get into, I was in Romans this morning and I'm reading through and I'm cross-channeling somewhere else and I'm not really getting an answer to the question that I was posing. And then it's just so funny. I get in my prayer time and it says, I need you to step into the work. I need you to step into the work. And I knew exactly what he meant. It was an employee issue and a contract issue. And I hadn't really looked at the details. And you saw this just an hour ago. When I walked into the meeting, and I'm not usually the guy that handles contracts or kind of lengthy agreements. I kind of look at it globally, and I have that kind of, but I caught math mistakes by the person putting it together.
Not me. Not me. It's for the record.
And it started with, yeah, it wouldn't be you. It started with a faithfulness to his word this morning in saying, step into the work. That's what I want you to do right now. I don't want you to worry about anything more than you've got some work to do here. The other thing about abiding that you just don't comprehend until you're in it is how often you'll leave the time where you're in the word. It might be to go to neutral. It might be step into the work. It might be nothing being confirmed. And then 4 times during the day, you get absolute confirmation. By a brother coming up against you or to you, or a sister coming up and saying this, or how did this happen? I had it happen an hour ago before we even got on the call. At one of my, the question I just thought about this. The question I was abiding in this morning that said, step into the work. In the middle of the meeting of the contracts, I got a call from one of my C12 colleagues who gave me the answer.
Wow.
I just realized this. I came back into the room with 5 of my senior people.
He gave me a look.
And then they said, well, what's going on? And I said, I make the next call on this. Well, what are you gonna say? I make the next call on this. That's what I just got from God. This is what God just told me. I make the next call. Well, I was gonna make the call, and I was gonna do this. No one's doing anything. I'm making the next call. All right, well, what do we, you wanna dry run that? You wanna go through it? I said, nope, I know exactly what I have to do. It's clear. That's today.
Yeah, that's pretty.
You're right, I
cool.
was gonna top you.
What's
I
you
didn't think I could top that, but that happened
it.
today. And it wasn't, I didn't get a verse in the morning. What I got was,
Discernment.
step into the work, please. I need you to, I call a meeting to step into the work, and in the meeting I get a call. Pulling me out of the meeting. Saying, here's your answer.
What you're describing is that 24/7 abiding. It's not, abiding, we think of it sometimes, and so much in the church world is we sit down and we have our abide time, or we have our time in the word and whatever, but God calls us to abide 24/7 with him and to practice his presence. And so as we are faithful to come before him with our questions and in his word, he does exactly what you say. And throughout the day, he continues speaking to us because we have a surrendered heart wanting to hear.
Well said. So well said. And if I could wish anything on my colleagues or the people that are taking the abiding retreat with me each Thursday morning, it would be to understand that, Kathy, to understand that.
Well, you just gave a perfect example of it, though. I love that.
And that God's will is step by step, which is beautiful. That, well, step into the work. Okay. You call a meeting to step into the work. We're going to process this. While you're doing that, God says, "Here, I'm gonna give you, I'm gonna give you an answer, which you paid attention to. Okay, I'm gonna take this call. Here's your answer. Walk back in. And so by just and what Kathy and I've been trying to tell everybody about God's will, which you guys can share more about, is we tend to just want the end line. Just give me the end. And he says, well, why don't you walk with me, and I'll give it to you step by step, and you just be faithful to the immediate step, which he said to you this morning. I'll just step into the work. Okay.
What also comes out of, and I know with his recent decision to go into that meeting, go into that meeting, and then be pulled out again, is the fact that when the decisions are made and these, say whatever comes out, he decides, yes, we're going to go for it. He's comfortable in that decision. And I know as a fellow business person, when your decisions have that power behind it, regardless of what the outcome is. You know, you could lose money, you could make money, regardless what the outcome is, you're confident in your decision.
Yeah.
And that's important as a business person, that's the right decision. It's like when you send your children away to school, to college, you pray on what school should they go to. And when you get there, even if they screwed up, you know it's still the right place for them because you put so much work and prayer into it.
Yeah.
So that's the result you're finding down the road. And sometimes we don't recognize that immediately, but I feel more confident in making decisions. And I know you do as well, Dean, that the confidence are based not in our education, they're not in maybe some numbers. They're based in prayer.
How do you two, as you together process to discern God's will, how do you guys do that as a couple?
We argue about it.
We argue. We rival. A common line with me was, well, I better go. I'm going to go confirm that, Trish.
Yeah.
And of course,
I'm like, you do that. You do that.
I do that with incredible grace.
Okay, all right, well, that's good.
That everybody would want to be around, which I don't. But
you know what's funny? We come together on a lot of stuff. We could think each other like we'll be in church and they'll be asking us for a particular decision, and he'll say, all he has to say is, "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" And I'm like, "Yes." And the number's there. If it's a number, say it's a cap.
It's bizarre. We have times where we'll be at a function where there's a call for a donation. That's an easy one to use in an illustration like this because it's numerical and it's easy to go to. And I know when she looks at me and she says, "I got a number in mind." I said, "It's the same one."
Yeah.
Just get your checkbook out and write it. And I'm not kidding. It's never not the same one.
Yeah.
I love that.
We don't just default to the same number all the time. $10. We don't default to that. It's usually a different number, but we just always are lined up. And in our big decisions,
it actually, last night we had dinner with a prospect last night, and we both came out of that. And then, I mean, it's just, it can bring us to the next level business wise, but we both came out of that saying this prospect is a strong Christian as well. And we came out of that with an ease that, and this is how we come together. I said to him, regardless of what happens, if he comes with us, it's God's decision. And if he doesn't come with us, it's God's decision. So, and he was like, I was thinking that exactly. And it just took all the pressure off of us, but it's fine. So what do you want to watch when you go home? And I mean, this is a prospect that could take us in double our business in a matter of 6 months. And him and I were so at peace with it because we knew that God's decision is God's decision. We put the work into it already.
Yeah, we had an hour ride home, and normally in an old time before 2015 at least, I would dry run with Trish what my next move was going to be and what it was going to sound like and how I wouldn't make a mistake and I'd handle it this way or this way or this way or this way. And we had none of that. We were out of the parking lot and the conversation was over, and it was on to how much we liked them personally and how much we admired a number of the faith discussions that they had. And we took the hour ride home and we never talked about very intricate contract stuff that came up this morning.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, it's powerful. It's kind of mind blowing. You might, Rich, write this down because you might want to do it. Yeah, called supernatural.
Think I should do something on that?
I think if you put one of your little retreats together around supernatural, I don't know. I think it could work.
Yeah.
Because that's what it is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you work toward getting confirmation in the Spirit, which you're kind of describing, how could you help our audience understand that? Because when you get the same number, it's, you say something and that's what I'm sensing the same. How does that, describe how that works so that the audience can understand it? Because sometimes it's a mystery. It's like, well, yeah, you guys are lucky, but it's not luck. It's usual. It's supposed to be usual. So how does that work for you?
Yeah, I don't know. You got something on that?
Well, I think we're both so heavy in our with being in the Word, and we're in different parts of the Bible together. So I think the discernment just comes upon us.
Yeah.
It's supernatural, right?
Right.
That's at least how I feel about it, that it's just there. Because of the obedience that we have.
Right.
Yeah, and to that point, I think we've both gotten good. I can say this for me. I don't want to presuppose this on anyone else, but when there's a moment where I don't feel like I'm at that spot, or just any number of times like that, the question is, am I being disobedient in some area?
Oh yeah.
Am I not? Is there something God's saying to me that I'm ignoring or doing the opposite of?
Unrelated.
And I asked the Holy Spirit, let's go to Ephesians 6:18, that let the Spirit lift up my prayer and say, is there something? Do I have blinders on here? And you know what? There is. There usually is. It's, you've heard my wine testimony, Rich. I think I shared it with you, which is a lengthy testimony. But for a year, God wanted me to drop the idol of wine, and I negotiated for a solid year. And I did a brilliant job.
Yeah.
It's some of my best work ever.
Yeah.
And it's almost to that moment of when I surrendered to, and he put a full court press on me with my abiding. It's the greatest abiding testimony I have. It's supernatural. It's bizarre. It's like, I can't even imagine. You watched it.
Yeah.
And like, I gave up wine on May 6th, 2017, without knowing I was giving up wine. And I can attest to you, and I've said this to you guys, I did not have a drinking problem. I would tell you if I did, I have no problem with that.
It was a hobby for you, right? Weren't you very much into the different...
I ran organizations on it. I had an 1,800 bottle wine cellar. I chose my restaurants on it. I chose hotels on it. I would bring my own wine to the abiding retreat, Rich, just in case.
But you had better stuff.
So God revealed to me in no uncertain terms that I had been disobedient in trying to negotiate this. And he laid the wood to me for a 4-day period that's supernatural. And then I said, all right, I get it. It's over, but I can't do this. You said, take it away from me. I can't do this. I cannot do this. And Trish hears me say it all the time. If I smell a glass of red wine right now, I smell NyQuil. I don't know how that ever happened.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But once the obedience, I can trail some things back, and not that it's a quid pro quo or there's any kind of supposition around that. I can look back to how my life has changed since that time, that May of 2017. 3 of my 4 children have been baptized. My wife's been baptized. I was baptized just before that. I can go into how my ramp up in C12 brought in EOS, which changed the entire culture of Shamrock to the point where we've had 4 or 5 years in a row that have just been historic. Now, maybe that doesn't have anything to do with it. I'm not trying to say it's one for the other. And I've had many times abiding now where, Lord, what's going on? He's saying, check your obedience. Are you being obedient in an area? And I'm not. Believe me.
Yeah. And when go ahead,
No,
Trish.
there's times where he exposes it.
Okay.
And then I say, all right, but boy, that's going to be hard. That's going to be hard.
Okay, so when that happens to you, and you hear that, again, that's the Holy Spirit, and what do you then do with that? And you even said it, is that he's not saying to you, well, go fix it and let me know. He just says, this is an area that I'd like to work on. How do you then process that through to, being obedient, but him fulfilling what he just said to you? How does that work?
I'm trying to think of a good example. So the first thing is I try to confirm that I actually heard the disobedience.
Yeah.
Because the devil's pretty good at telling you being disobedient at times too.
Yeah.
So I may spend a few days really asking God to reveal the disobedience is from you.
Yeah.
Because there's plenty of rats in my head, and there's plenty of people around that have rats at their disposal at all times. So I get through that process, and then I surrender that I cannot be obedient in this area. without you. And sometimes they can, sometimes it's really simple. But I remember I did a retreat, a 24-hour retreat last year. I don't even think I shared this with you. That was, so, you know, some business goal setting along with some spiritual goal setting and just getting away for 24 hours by myself, which I did. And he immediately took me to the back end of Proverbs 31 to read about my wife. And so my first 2 pages of notes were from that area. And he said, you're not obedient in how I want you to be with your wife. I've told you this, this, and this of how you react. And I don't want this. So I immediately assumed that was the devil, of course, because I couldn't be from God. So I got a whole nother notebook out and I went to an ESV Bible instead of an NIV just to make sure I had it right. And I got to tell you, for the next 2 or 3 weeks, he just continued to expose times where I was lacking obedience with my tongue in those areas.
Wow.
And so I think that's some of the process. It's always a work in process. But I'll tell you what, I know one way not to have it done, and that don't abide.
Right.
Don't abide. Don't journal, don't cross-reference, don't get in the word, don't pray, don't seek the wise counsel of others around you. Yeah, that's the way to stay disobedient. That makes it really easy.
Yeah. Yeah. And for both of you, like Trish, when God is speaking something that, well, I'm not sure about this, or it doesn't make sense to me, why do you still rejoice at that, and how do you process that?
So when God speaks to me, he speaks pretty clearly. He tends to speak to me in the very difficult, when he speaks to me, he yells at me. I don't know how else to say it, but during the day, there's some certain, he's speaking to me through his word. And that starts out in the morning and it starts my day. And as the day progresses, it's kind of a conversation that happens on a lighter note. But every once in a while, and it happened to me a couple weeks ago, he screams at me. And I had a situation a couple weeks ago that I felt someone walk into my room. Dean was away. I felt someone walk in. We had a good family friend who was going through a very, very difficult time. Very difficult. And that night, I felt someone walk into my room and sit at the end of my bed. I literally felt the bed go down. And I thought, so I heard him walk into my room. And then when he sat down, I said, oh, one of the dogs must be on the bed. And then I realized it wasn't the dog. So I had one question. My question was, what do you want me to do? And he answered me. So, and then I just, went back to sleep. But I woke up the next morning with a command to do. And it did not have to do with business, which normally, because this kind of had to do with business, the whole issue we were having, this particular person's involved in business. The whole command had taken me in a direction that wasn't a direction I would have chose.
Yeah.
I would have chose, let's get into the business of this and figure this out. Let's hit the ground running.
It's got to be a spreadsheet for that.
That wasn't me. That my command was in a different direction. And I woke up so scared, really, because I didn't know how to do that other direction. But I had the confidence that I would be able to take care of it.
Yeah.
So, Rich, your question, how does it look? It's pretty strong when it hits me.
Yeah.
When it hits me, it's not a whisper. It's happening.
Yeah.
I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. And for you, as you described the word yell. It's just, you're talking about there's a strength there that he's saying, pay attention to this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's kind of that. And Dean, you described a little bit differently. So one thing that Kathy and I talk about is that every way that God speaks is unique. That hits you and how you respond to it. And, like Dean, you were describing, hey, son, is there something that you're, not obedient to? And you say, yeah, I'm willing to hear it. What do you have to say? Make sure it's from you. And what do you have to say? And then when he says it, okay, now you got to give me the strength to work through that to fulfill it. So you've described, both of you described such a beautiful, fresh, authentic way of just walking with God, and we can see it in you guys. You guys are enthusiastic about it, and you're having the time of your life, and you're doing it together, and that's a real privilege for us to see. So we're just thankful that you shared that with us today as we end our time together. Thank you so much for giving everybody a real understanding of what it means to walk with God, and we're gonna have you back, and we'll find out about that potential client that you said, well, God, what do you got to say about that? That'll be fun to see. And we'll look forward to seeing you guys soon. And Kathy, what a privilege it is to have Dean and Trish share. And again, as we just love that they can be so real and everybody can understand that reality, so what a beautiful thing.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
thanks
appreciation
for
is
sharing
ours.
everything,
Thanks, Rich.
guys.
Yep.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon. And Kathy, we will see you tomorrow with End Times Friday. So
Sounds great. All right. Have a great week, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
yep,
Thanks.
see you guys soon.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.